So the question for today really is, can we persuade Brexity pensioners to vote Corbyn? So, I mean, the biggest rule with deep canvassing is just do not disagree with the voter. That's like the main thing that you've got to sort of take away from today. Right, we'll start then. I'm going to show you a conversation that we've had with voters, because since the election finished last year, there's been a small group of us who've been going out canvassing and recording the conversations with voters and then seeing what works and what doesn't. That's where we've sort of developed all the techniques that we're going to show you today. Hiya. On a score of 1 to 10, what score would you give Theresa May?
Yeah, it wouldn't be on there.
It's hard, thank you. Is it because of Brexit or?
No,
because you just don't like Tories.
it's not that I don't like the Tories. It's obviously what's going on, isn't it? They're promising you the world and then knocking it back 2 months later, aren't they?
Right. So, like, what score would you give Jeremy Corbyn or someone like that?
I just feel as though everybody's in the same situation.
Right.
They're going to promise the world as well, aren't they? Like all politicians do.
Right.
They all promise you the world, and then you have after, don't they?
Yeah.
So,
Seems that way, doesn't it? What score did you give Jeremy Corbyn? You gave Theresa May a 2?
No, I never give.
Oh, no, you didn't give her a score.
You didn't give her a score, no.
I don't even want to give Jeremy Corbyn a score.
Yeah. So yeah, basically what we do is we sort of look for any slow-moving pensioners on the streets and we run after them with this board and we go, on a scale of 1 to 10, what score would you give Theresa May? And it just seems to work. I mean, you hated it at first, didn't you, Chris? You thought this was such a bad idea.
I had this idea of a clipboard to make it look so like official. If you just want to have people just avoid you, just like, you know, make beelines away from you, just approach them with a clipboard. That's much better.
Yeah. I mean, loads of people didn't like the idea of using a big board like this at first, but it really does work, and it leads to a really long conversation with the voter. I mean, the interesting thing with this conversation is that he gave Theresa May a score of 0. And he wouldn't even give Jeremy Corbyn a score. I mean, that's less than 0, basically. That's what he's saying. So we had a real challenge with this conversation to convert him to voting Labour. And at the beginning of the conversation with the voters, what we do is we look for clues. So we're trying to find out which of these 4 categories they fit into. And then once we've found out which category they fit into, then we know what sort of script to use. So I'm going to play the conversation with the voter, and you just try and work out which of those 4 categories you think he falls into.
do you think they can't pay for what they're saying? Is that you're suspicious of them, like that?
Well, I think everybody's suspicious of what's going on, isn't it?
Yeah.
As you said, and there again, the right to say at the moment that the Tories promised £350 million a week to the NHS. They can't deliver it. They can't deliver it. It's impossible. So they're lying to get the votes. And then taking the piss out of it as they're going along, aren't they?
Has it always been this way since you can remember?
I don't know. Certainly, since the Tories have took over in the last 8 years or something, things have really gone downhill for like the unemployed, housing, things like that. So,
What do you think about like if political parties start to raising taxes to pay for some of these things? Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
So, because Labour were talking about raising corporation tax and like taxes on people on over £80,000.
Well, even people on, let's say, up to £30,000 a year. You know what I mean? They wouldn't mind. They don't mind paying an extra 2 pence in tax, do they? Because if you're going to get the services out of it, you know what I mean?
It's cheaper than buying medical insurance, isn't it?
You know what I mean? It's always going to be difficult because the country's been up in arms for 30 odd years, hasn't it?
Yeah. Do you think it changed in the 80s? Is that like
I don't know, to be quite honest. It's because one's taking over from the next one, and then obviously they're all sat there in Whitehall, and they're all, well, it's your fault that this has happened, and it's your fault that this has happened, and then the next government gets in, and this is your fault.
Yeah, it seems that way.
They jump into each other all the time, aren't they?
Tit for tat, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, how I think, obviously, it's the taxpayer that's paying them. If they was to work in a normal workplace and take a piss like that, they'd be gone, wouldn't they? So why can't it be the same for them?
Exactly,
What you paying politicians, 74 grand a year? You turn up at Whitehall, you're paying 300 quid a day for the meal allowances and things like that. And then they've all got nice posh houses in London that the government's paying for, or the taxpayers paying for. On a life of luxury, and they're laughing at us.
Have you always lived round here?
I don't live round here, I live in Warrington.
Oh, do you? Right.
I work in Warrington.
Yeah, so there you go. There's a few clues there to whereabouts on the political spectrum that he falls. Does anyone want to have a guess? Have a stab in the dark? Go on, David.
Socially conservative and economically left.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with that, especially the economically left. Because he's socially conservative and economically left, these are the topics that we usually bring up in conversation. They're the ones that, I mean, the ones that really work for us are nationalisation and tax havens. They're the ones where we get the brownie points off the voters. Obviously, stuff like immigration and benefits, it's a lot more challenging when it comes to using this deep canvassing technique, because remember that first rule of deep canvassing is do not disagree with the voters. So when they're coming out with some sort of, things on immigration about immigrants and stuff like that, or people scrounging off the state when it comes to benefits, it's really challenging to use that deep canvassing technique, but it really does work. That's all I can say. So yeah, so now we're going to start the conversation, and we're going to talk about jobs and immigration. So in the Northwest, have you noticed, like, since you were sort of like younger, have you noticed that there's less jobs or less secure jobs?
There certainly is less jobs,
Is there?
Right,
yeah.
I mean, at one time, when I was a bit younger anyway, certainly you could finish one job one day on a Friday and go and start another one on a Monday.
You're joking, could you?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then obviously it comes down to immigrants as well, doesn't it? And and that's what they're saying. People can't get jobs here because obviously.
And I mean, you even get the Labour Party and the trade unions saying that the immigrants have sort of, made the wages lower. They've sort of kept them low,
right,
which is obviously a problem, isn't it?
Well, it is,
So and the reason why we like to talk about subjects like jobs and immigration is that it sort of primes the voter for a conversation about nationalisation. So you're just warming them up to the conversation about nationalisation, so they see it in a positive light. It's quite, not everyone agrees with this, but when we were talking about immigration there, I was really trying to find something where I agreed with him on immigration. So, I mean, I said, like, even the trade unions and the Labour Party saying that immigration suppresses wages. So that's something where, that's one little thing that they can agree on. I'm not asking you to agree, if he's going off on a big Britain First rant, don't nod your head and agree with everything he says, but just try and find one little nugget that you can just latch onto and just agree with it, if you genuinely do agree with it.
So, what would you say when they're like, because obviously one of the big differences is like Labour is talking about like nationalising things again, and I mean, when a lot of the utilities were privatised in the 80s, they were supposed to become more efficient and cheaper, and like a lot of them have been flogged abroad, and that they're own back. I mean, what would your opinion be on something like that?
I'd bring it all back. And then obviously these privatised things like gas and electricity where they can charge what they want to.
And it's the French government own EDF.
Yeah,
I mean, the Chinese own our power stations and we're paying them extortionate amounts of money to use our own power stations.
Why can't we do it?
Exactly, yeah.
So yeah, put the money into our part instead of paying it over there, and then we'll probably get ourselves sorted out.
Yeah.
So I mean, what would you think about like the government getting a lot more involved in trying to get like more manufacturing jobs up there and things like that?
That's what we should do. Yeah. North's suffering, isn't it?
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? I think they were all, they were closed down in the 80s, but they weren't really replaced by anything, were they?
Oh, they were replaced by benefits. That's what they were replaced by. That was it. So yeah, I mean, we talked about nationalisation and immigration, and what I was trying to sort of explain was if you use immigration to prime them for that nationalisation argument, what you're basically doing is they're going off on a bit of an anti-immigration rant, and then you're sort of using that narrative to say, yeah, but what about all these foreign governments and foreign companies that are sort of, how can I put it?
Exploiting the country's resources.
Yeah, exploiting the country's resources, yeah. I mean, what do people think about that? Do they think I just went a bit too much off on a... Was it a bit too socially conservative, what I was saying, does it?
It did feel kind of strange to not respond to the immigration argument. I think that's when it's like,
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're focusing in on what they're saying, and then you're just expanding their view, aren't you, rather than, so that you kind of subconsciously in some ways, you're making them think about, not think about the individual, but think about the companies, because the fact is that companies can move around as much as they want. There's no restrictions on multinationals. So instead of like saying, well, we should be stopping the movement of people, like it's just going, actually, is this problematic?
Just going to go back to this political spectrum thing. I think one of the traps that we fall into as Labour canvassers is when we meet someone who's socially conservative and economically left, really the low-hanging fruit. We should easily be able to get them to vote for Jeremy Corbyn because they're economically left. But the trap that we fall into is that we try and make socially conservative people, we try and convert them into socially liberal people. So it's like we're not picking our battles wisely. We should really be focusing on this bit, the economically left bit, and we don't. We try and sort of change the whole personality. It's like, if they've got negative views of immigration, what I'm saying basically is just concentrate on the economically left stuff. Go on, David, go on.
No, I totally agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, and I suppose the thing about deep canvassing is as well, it's sort of like, for it to work, it's got to be a two-way process. So if you want them to be open-minded and open their mind towards your arguments, you've got to do the same with their arguments as well, and you've truly got to open your mind and try and find out whether their arguments, if there's an element of truth in it. And sometimes we just go into combat straight away, and we don't have our minds open, do we, when we're talking to them? We just want to go on but the NHS had collapsed without immigrants straight away, and it's like, just listen a bit more, and there are nuggets of truth in what they're saying. Go on.
It's like the thing you're saying as well, like, when you find those little nuggets of truth, that's something they're already passionate about.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not like trying to stop that passion and turn it in a new direction.
Yeah.
You're just going, okay, we care about that too, but this is how we care about it.
Yeah.
And if you put your passion with our passion, here's something we can achieve, rather than just being like, you need to stop thinking about that and think about something you don't really care about.
Yeah.
It's just really, it seems obvious once you point it out, and it's so efficient kind of thing as well.
Yeah, and it's so hard to do when you're actually face to face with someone, one-on-one, talking with them. It's really hard to do. But basically, what I'm trying to say is that we want them to feel part of our in-group, and when we start sort of challenging their socially conservative views, we're making them feel like we're an out-group to them. So it's all about, the more we go on about the economically left stuff, the more they're going to feel like they're one of us, which is the whole point. That's when it starts to work. So yeah, in the same way that we used immigration to prime them for the subject of nationalisation, we're now going to use benefits to prime them for the subject of tax havens, which is obviously something that we're really strong on. And if people have got issues with tax avoidance and stuff like that, it's Labour that they look to solve that problem. They're obviously not going to look to the Tories to solve it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to use the subject of benefits. And once, again, you're just looking for a little nugget of truth. So if they're complaining about people scrounging off the state, instead of going into battle and saying, yeah, but it's only 1% that are actually like that, 99% of people are the genuine, rather than going into that battle, just say, well, yeah, there are people, we all know people like that, don't we? And then just move on, just quickly move on to the tax havens thing. And you'll be surprised if you do that, how much they start talking about other things when it comes to benefits and actually criticising the Tories.
All this bollocks about, where they're saying that we've got so many millions of people off benefits and into work. They've changed them from claiming benefits or whatever it was, income support, and they've changed them onto this independence.
Personal independence.
Yeah,
right,
so the numbers go straight away.
Oh, yeah.
A million people go straight away.
Oh, such a fix, isn't it?
Yeah, flagging it over. We've got a million people into it. You're like,
2 weeks ago, we were saying there's no unemployment in Britain. What country does he live in?
They really laughed at him. You know what I mean? There's no unemployment.
Yeah. Right, so like I said, I've primed him now for talking about tax havens, so I'll just go on to that.
People that sit in Whitehall, how many of them have got bank accounts elsewhere?
Exactly, yeah. Offshore bank accounts, tax havens, all that,
Cameron found out, wasn't he?
Well, it's like that Lord Ashcroft, in that panorama thing, where that was funny, where he's following them around, so like saying, you've been keeping your money in the Cayman Islands.
Yeah.
If they're fiddling the system, you know what I mean?
Oh, exactly. That's the problem.
They're going to do deals, as they are, with these big, massive companies to keep them here.
I mean, I think that's the biggest failure when Labour in government, that they didn't, because obviously Tony Blair is from a rich background, and he didn't want to get all this tax off these rich companies, did he? Because he would have lost money if he'd have done that, so he's not going to do it, is he?
There's just too much of it, isn't there?
Oh, yeah.
You scratch my back, I'll
exactly,
scratch yours.
Yeah. But they all went to the same private schools, didn't they? So, So, I mean, one of the things that works really well when you're canvassing with Brexit pension is just criticising Tony Blair. I mean, there'll be loads of people who disagree with that, but honestly, it can make such a difference to actually persuading them in the end to vote for Labour. It makes such a huge difference. I think it makes them, it's about that feeling like the part of your in-group. I think that's how it works. And they don't feel like you're just, I don't know, because sometimes in the past I've sort of, if they've said something critical of Tony Blair, I've felt like I should defend him for some reason, just because, I don't know, you just do it because, well, you're representing Labour, so you feel, like I said, you sort of go into battle, don't you? And then you just lose what you actually believe.
Just to say that, he's not lazy, he's the infiltrator, the enemy within, the man who turned the party, the taint, the cancer. That's what he is. And the thing is, if these guys speak against Blair, I wholeheartedly say, well, I can't stand him either. I hope he goes to jail. And in fact, I'm like putting into the crowd to try and prosecute him, so,
But Mandy, when we were doing it in Southport, remember that woman that we talked to, and we weren't really persuading her, were we? It was like 20 minutes into the conversation and I didn't feel like we were getting anywhere. And then Tony Blair came up in conversation and we were like quite critical of him, weren't we? And after that, it just sort of, it seemed to be a turning point in the conversation where she eventually gave Jeremy an 8 out of 10, where at the beginning she'd give him a 0 out of 10. What's that, Ricky?
Maybe came down because
exactly,
we wrote the name out to say, we're not red, we're not blue. We've got to find common things that we agree on. And we're all for each other. It's not, we've got to support these people even though we don't agree with them. So because you criticise Tony Blair, you probably thought, oh, actually, your guard's going to come down, I think,
Exactly, that's perfect. I think that's what happened,
I think with a lot of door knocking and conversations with voters and things, it can feel like there's a really strong urge to say, when they're coming out with the mainstream media lines that they've been spun, there's a really strong urge in the canvasser to say, they're, Corbyn, Labour, they are on your side, we're on your side, you know what I mean? But I think what this does is, this technique somehow or other, somehow you both end up on the same side, without feeling so much frustration about it. That's why I think it's quite a powerful technique. It's quite subtle though, isn't it?
It's very subtle, very subtle. So another thing that we like to bring in is the subject of social class, because a lot of Brexit pensioners don't feel like the Labour Party represents them anymore. They feel like the middle class, that there's no working class people in the party anymore. Although they do speak warmly about people like Dennis Skinner and John Prescott, but they perceive them to be, I don't know if they perceive them to be socially conservative just because of their age, and they sort of feel a bond with them. I don't know. I mean, I imagine Dennis Skinner and John Prescott are very liberal people, but the perception of them from the public, I think they just sort of connect with them.
I don't think almost, it's like seeing people who are a bit like me.
That's it, yeah.
And that's probably a key thing. If you, I think it's interesting that, I mean, when I kind of get onto that topic sometimes with people, it's quite when you get onto that idea. I mean, I've had it a couple of times where you talk about the decline of working class people as MPs. You know, the decline of the amount of trade unionists that happened over the last like 30 odd years.
Yeah.
And that's quite it's an us and them thing. And when you sort of maybe mention Angela Rayner, not so much the other ones because they don't have the sort of like the media profile. Yeah. That often gets a quite good nod. You know, this sense of sort of like, well, we want you to be a bit more like us. It's easy for us to, if you're speaking our language. Kind of.
It's almost like they feel they've been betrayed because they used to see us as a working class party, and now I don't know.
They probably were, weren't they?
Right. Yeah, I'll play what he says anyway.
Do you think one of the problems with, say, for instance, like in the last sort of during the Blair years and all that, but like it became all middle class and it was all posh people in politics. Do you think like in the old, in the like the 70s, there was more union people, there was more working class people?
Skinner, don't you?
Yeah,
exactly. He's a boy and a half, isn't he? He just doesn't care, does he?
Yeah. I mean, do you think it's a good thing that like there's like in the Labour Party there's like they're starting to get more working class people in there?
Because
like Angela Rayner and people like that.
It's challenging them then.
Yeah.
People from places like here, from backgrounds like us.
Yeah. What you should see is just even if it's a couple, just everyday people.
Yeah. Well, Angela Rayner's like that. She was a single mum and then she went on to do that. And there's a couple. You're actually starting to see people with northern accents in Parliament. It's like I haven't seen that.
Proper working class people as well.
That's what I think should happen.
Yeah. And then maybe they might go after these big companies and get the tax off them.
Right,
Yeah, it's all about making them feel like you're part of the in-group. When you talk about social class and they can see that you're working class like them, it just sort of works. And then you're linking it back to tax havens here by saying if there was more working class people in government, then they would go after tax havens because that's something that we believe passionately about, isn't it? And it's sort of just that narrative in the head, it just sort of fits like a jigsaw puzzle.
Do you think the rich are getting a lot richer?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's like
as you say, somebody's obviously advising them to put money in tax havens.
Yeah.
As you say, Hamilton. What did he lose or gain out of it? We lost £3 million, they say, in his tax by getting his plane.
Yeah, because he's just parked there for like 4 hours in the Isle of Man, wasn't it? Something like that.
Yeah. Flying his mates all around the place.
But he put it on Facebook as well. He said it was purely for business expenses. I thought that was brilliant. Just a big picture of him with his family, just going on a trip.
And the poor people are paying for it.
Yeah, exactly. The nail on the head there. Morgan Stanley, that big bank in America, they were saying, if Corbyn gets into government, the banks are in trouble. And Corbyn came out and went, yeah, you're right, you are in trouble because they want to get loads of tax off you.
That's right,
I thought that was great, the way he said that.
He's right at the end of the day. And I think if he really got his head together.
So that's it. I mean, this is probably, we've been chatting to him for about 25 minutes now. And this is the first time really since the beginning that I've mentioned Jeremy Corbyn's name. And because I've been priming him for the past 25 minutes, he's starting to see him in a positive light. So it's all sort of coming together. I mean, someone described it to me as if you're going on a first date, you wouldn't ask someone to marry you on the first date. So you shouldn't knock on someone's door and ask them to vote Labour straight away. It's just it's not going to work. You have to slowly build up to it, like you do in a relationship, and it can take a long time, and it's a subtle process. And it's like that with deep canvassing. You're just subtly leading up to it. And I've put the feelers out there, and at this point in the conversation, I'm getting pretty good feedback from him about Jeremy Corbyn. So it's time to pop the question. I'm going to ask the same question again. I'm going to ask him, on a scale of 1 to 10, what score would you give Jeremy Corbyn? And hopefully, if the deep canvassing has worked, you should give him a positive number. I mean, one of the things that the Conservatives are really worried about at the moment is the fact that at the last general election, hardly anyone under the age of 50 voted for the Conservatives, and they're really worried about that.
Yeah, so obviously we've got to try and get... I think Corbyn's right in what he says, but he's not nailed it yet, into practice, you know what I mean?
Right, yeah. But you think if Jeremy Corbyn, though, if he gets himself organised, do you think if he gets himself sorted, what would you give him out of 10 then?
I'd probably give him an 8 out of 10.
An 8? Right, brilliant. Oh, that's great. No.
Interesting.
It's interesting, isn't
it? Yeah, it's trust at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah.
If someone tells you something, like the Conservatives at the moment, they've gone around with this big bus, and this is what people are complaining about.
Exactly, yeah.
You've gone around with this big bus saying that £350 million a week can come to the NHS. So bring the £350 million to the NHS.
Yeah. Instead of telling us you're going to do cuts to the NHS, I mean, what's all that about? Yeah.
Right, lads.
It's been great
I'll let you
talking
go.
to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Nice
Hopefully we'll let you kill a bit of time while you're waiting anyway. That was really interesting.
All right, mate. No problem.
Brilliant. Thanks now. Try now. So there you go. At the beginning of the conversation, he wouldn't even give Jeremy a score out of 10. He gave Theresa May a 0, and he wouldn't even give Jeremy a score. And then 25 minutes later, he's giving Jeremy 8 out of 10. And that's how it works, basically. And I just want to know what you think about the deep canvassing technique. I mean, does anyone disagree with it? I mean, I've sort of done it to groups before where they sort of think that you shouldn't, they don't agree with this bit where you shouldn't disagree with the voter. They've got a real problem with it because they feel like we're sort of supporting what they're saying by not disagreeing with them. Go on.
Well, they don't understand the first rule of sales, do they?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So you're selling them something, aren't you? So you're not going to disagree with them and put them on the defensive.
Yeah. That's it, yeah, because the barriers just go up straight away as soon as you disagree with them. You can see it.
For me, I think that conversation, the most telling thing was that last quote saying it's about trust. I think that's the biggest problem that you're going to have to overcome because people don't trust politicians.
Yeah.
Why should they trust Jeremy Corbyn? Especially even more so if he's offering things that they want because they don't want to be let down.
Yeah.
So how do you get past that?
Well, yeah, I mean, my answer to that would be we're trying to get them to trust us, and I think that's enough. Yeah. Do people want to sort of... Is there anyone who disagrees with what I've done?
I disagree with it. I just think it's going to be very difficult that do not disagree with voters.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons why we work in pairs is because if you've got passionate views about immigration, obviously you take a step back, and if you're working with someone like me, I can sort of lead the conversation from that point.
It's just how anything changes. I'm a therapist and
all right.
people like you would never, I don't know, with someone who's like self-harming or something, you'd never just go and go, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Like obviously that's not how people change.
Yeah.
This is how people are much more likely to change.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I actually think it's very similar to, I mean, I've never been to therapy or anything, but I imagine a therapist would sort of be like this, where they just nod and sort of make the right noises and occasionally chip in with something. I always think this deep canvassing technique, I feel like it's been developed by therapists because it's quite a...
It's psychology.
Mm-hmm.
It's applied psychology is what it is, specifically to persuasion.
I think as well, when you're not disagreeing with people, it automatically becomes about their opinion and not yours, and I think that's where probably a lot of us fall down, because we got into this because we've got strong opinions and we do care, but in these scenarios, it's not about what you think, it's about what they think, and just bringing them a little bit closer to what we think, or letting them know that actually they do think the same things we think and they don't know it yet.
That's what it is. That's what I tried to say before. I think people do agree with what we're trying to say, but they've been that brainwashed by the media and stuff. That it's just going to take that little bit of extra time to put a into to what they're actually saying, so they make the connection. Oh, actually, to agree with them.
Yeah.
And that's what it's about, and this is going to be a good tool.
Spot on. Yeah.
Nobody likes to be told their opinion. Like they want to themselves.
That's it. Yeah. That's it. Exactly. Really, it's not about. We shouldn't be trying to persuade the voter. We should just be creating an environment where they persuade themselves, and that's what it's all about, really. Yeah.
Well, I think another thing is that, like, what I found from being only recently, like, being part of the left, because obviously I could be politically active for a long time, like, is that there's a lot of absolutism within, like, people who are politically active within the left. And they take a hardline stance on it, and they're very militant and combative, and they don't seem to understand that's not how you win people over. Do you know what I mean? You don't win people over by basically
bulldozing,
verbally assaulting them. Do you know what I mean? You know?
Yeah, no, I think that's something that Chris is really interested in, is that does deep canvassing change the canvasser as well as the voter? Do we sort of move towards each other? So at the end of the 25 minutes, we've sort of converged with our opinions, and do we both change as a result of the process? You're quite interested in that, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I mean, I found myself doing it. I mean, you know, I found that, you know, some of the stuff I'll be going on in a minute, it's just how I kind of make sense of it, but I tend to find when I approach it in that kind of way, I don't have any political arguments with my mum and dad and things like that, because it's much easier to find a common ground. It's much easier to, the way I tend to look at it is like you maximise your amount of time on the common ground, you minimise your amount of time on that sort of like that negative area. Your barriers both come down a little bit. You find that you've got a little bit more in common than you think. And then it's easier to agree to disagree on other issues. And that's the way I tend to look at it. You know, it's oh God, they're going off about, you know, that topic, but because you've spent the last 20 minutes agreeing about something, it's easier to kind of let it go. And I think that's, for me personally, there's a bit of truth to that. That you know, you can't really empathise with someone unless you're actually spending time with them and talking to them, and if they're just like a bit of a caricature to you, then you know you're not really going to connect with them in any kind of way, and it's easy to sort of make generalisations, and you're kind of just doing it as much to yourself as to that. Yeah.
I mean, I think what David was saying is all about people on the left. They can be quite stuck in the way. How would you describe it, David? They're quite...
It's militant and combative.
The
way that I could actually describe it. Empathy is the key. You can't look at the person like they're like a caricature, like they're... I mean, people like who are like borderline or hard right, right? If you look at them as a demographic, it's the same as like a lot of people that are on the left. They have the same social issues, the same social problems. But the thing is that like within their community via one mechanism or another, normally the rise of the right-wing mentality is a failure of the left to engage, or you know, the left has failed because people on the left weren't really left in the first place, which is what we've had with a lot of this neoliberalism within the Labour Party. You know, but if you talk to somebody, just ask them what the problem is. Ask them why they think the way that they think. Because normally there's a rational reason for people to think the way that they do.
That comes back to the therapy thing, isn't that one of the things that therapists do? Ask them why. No, I think that's a really...
There's not enough asking why. There isn't enough. And once you understand why they think the way that they think, then you can construct an argument. Well, not even an argument. You can construct a point as to why it mightn't be completely, or why it's not correct. But when you say it's not correct, it's like
it's hard to describe it, but you just want to nudge them into...
What they're saying mightn't be correct on their perception. What you want to do is change the perception. Do you know what I mean? And that's what it is. You need to like change the perception, but you need to understand what their perception is and why they can even think about changing the perception. And people who are militant are just like, guy's racist. Well, you know, he's a scumbag, there's just something wrong with him. You don't know what's gone on in his life or her life.
There's a lot of derogatory things as well, aren't there, in terms of caricaturing, particularly working class voters, like people describe them as turkeys voting for Christmas if they vote Tory, and things like that, as if they've done it unthinkingly. And it's kind of like when we do that, you can understand why people would look at us from the working class and caricature us as bleeding heart. You know, we'll give everything to benefit scroungers. That kind of thing. By caricaturing them, we put ourselves in the position to be caricatured by them. There's a disconnect, isn't there?
I agree with you, but I feel like a hypocrite because obviously I'm talking about brexity pensioners, so I'm caricaturing them.
In therapy terms, you talk about like that, taking an open, curious approach and then looking for the chinks. And there's this phrase like we often use, like push where it moves. So don't try and change someone's mind on a bit that's like really hard, and look for where there's a little bit of movement and go with that. And you're much more likely to, people are much more likely to change.
That's good.
I think also being able to look at the failures in your own arguments. I was watching some guy. He was like an American guy. He was some black reporter who worked for CNN. But he spent a lot of time going around what they call like the red states. You know, obviously the Republican ones who voted Trump. And one of the things he was saying is how condescending, sort of like like quite urban, like liberal kind of groups come over to those places. And he was saying you can see real sort of like double standards in so many of the arguments. One of the things he was saying is that thing with turkeys vote for Christmas. He was saying liberals will quite often in America say, well, how can you vote for anything that's against your economic self-interest? You must be stupid. But at the same time, if some sort of like very liberal millionaire or rich person votes to pay more taxes, which is in some ways against their economic interest, they're kind of noble. That kind of person's stupid. Whereas he might do that because he just doesn't want the state in his life. He might emotionally not like that. He might be one of those naturally individualistic people. But it's really easy it's a real double standard that you often get, that we're noble and they're stupid. And I think sometimes if you can kind of see yourself in them a little bit, and vice versa, it's easy to kind of not be too combative with them. So that's the way I tend to see it.
And I suppose when you're asking why, you're automatically going out with giving them well, I don't know the answer. You must feel like this for a reason. And you're opening yourself up to a bit of an attack, really, as well. And then it becomes a mutual exchange rather than, well, I have an opinion, I care about it. Yours isn't my opinion, so there can't be a reason for that. You've just not learned enough. Let me give you the answer.
Oh God, that's the thing.
Whereas we will educate you.
Oh God,
That's on certain, and I think as soon as you're not open to why, doesn't matter how. Obviously, that's a very extreme example. But if you're not asking why, you're somewhere on a spectrum that ends in that attitude, and people pick up on that so quickly.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've been
to do that and then say people are too passive in politics.
I mean, we've been to so many Labour Party meetings, where the candidates or the councillors or whatever have given this sort of talk before we go out door knocking, where they'll be like, we've just got to knock on the doors and educate them about how we transform their lives when we were in government. And like, oh no, that's so patronising.
But in some way, that's kind of, it's true, but you have to be open to being educated on what you've done wrong and why you've not got them on side already.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, that you can say I'm here to teach you something, but like you say, it's a mutual exchange. You want to be taught something. You think they've got as much to teach you as them.
That's it. If you're going into it with that attitude, it works, doesn't it? Yeah.
There's a really good Ronald Reagan quote, which I like, and it's called "If you're explaining, you're losing." And there's because it's more about persuasion. And it's a bit like if you're actually explaining to someone why they're wrong, you've probably lost already in terms of persuading them. So it's about finding what they actually know and kind of capitalising on that. And I think that it's a really, really good quote. I mean, you can sort of like read it and see it as kind of like almost depressing that you've got to tell people what they like, but it's not really saying that. It's it's really about sort of
in a way
you've got to get a common ground.
It's counterintuitive in some way, but it's factually correct.
It's
one of those things that it doesn't matter how great your ideology is and how right you feel where you are. If it doesn't work, it's useless.
Can I ask, is there any times when you've used this technique where it's just gone really badly?
Oh yeah, well, oh God, yeah. Oh God, yeah. What they say is, the scientists found out that obviously if there's 10 people who give you a score of 0 out of 10 at the beginning of the conversation, only one of those people is going to give you a high score at the end of the conversation. I mean, it's not magic. It doesn't work with everyone, but I mean, 1 out of 10, when you think of it in terms of on polling day, that is huge. 10%. If you get a swing like that, I mean, that is huge. That can win you a marginal seat easily. So.
If you do it 10% and they were already Tory, it's 20%.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I get the feeling from this bloke, we never asked him who he voted for or who he voted for last time or anything like that. But I get the feeling there was a point in the past where he voted Labour and now he's very disillusioned with politics. He probably doesn't vote anymore. If he does, he definitely doesn't vote for the Conservatives because he's from round here and we hate the Tories, but he might vote for UKIP, I don't know, or probably just doesn't vote at all. Or even if he did vote for Labour last time, he's probably thinking about not voting for him next time. He's sort of falling out of love with them. That was my gut instinct. But one of the things that we never do is ask them which way they vote, or we never mention, you know, who did you vote for last time or anything like that, because the barriers go up straight away. Yeah, I mean, does anyone think that we can persuade brexity pensioners to vote for Corbyn after listening to me talking for an hour? Or
once we learn to buy our tongues.
Yeah.
We were at Canvas in the other week, three of us.
Oh yeah.
And the last knock on the day, we did it together, didn't we? And it was so destroying. Don't vote. They're all the same.
Yeah.
And I'd like to try and
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I wanted to kill him by the time we were.
They're the people that we're going for. That's who's going to swing us the general election with this technique, definitely.